there's some really great shit. It's like one of the more fun, I guess, Batman tales, Batman stories. But yeah, anyways, let's transition into our main discussion. Cheney, what did we watch?
We watched in our Sci-Fi Smackdown number 2.
Yep.
We watched a fucking fantastic film, Ex Machina, and probably a not so fantastic film, Snowpiercer. Both of them
that's according to Cheney. That's Cheney's opinion. I thought Snowpiercer was fantastic. I'll just put that across.
Okay. Both of them are sci-fi movies. Both of them have very different settings. Both of them have very different concepts of what they set up. Both of them attempt to explore what most sci-fi movies, I think we talked about this a little bit in last episode, try to explore that inner humanity mostly.
Yeah. I think Ex Machina delves into a little more of that. It's much more within the self, with it, like a lot of philosophical ideas actually from both of these movies. I was thinking a lot philosophically about it because I just finished my philosophy course and I just had my final when I was watching Snowpiercer. So I was making a lot of connections, which we'll get into, I guess, because that's a lot of the cool things I found with Ex Machina was how quiet of a film it was. It's not like other sci-fi films that are gonna hit you over the head with these sci-fi tropes of like, you know, like it's a just a quick synopsis on Ex Machina. So it's directed by Alex Garland and it came out in, I think, 2014. Yeah. It stars what's his name? Star Wars guy.
Oh, fucking
Oscar Isaac.
Yeah, fantastic in this movie.
Yeah, great beard in the movie.
Yeah.
I was like modeling my beard after that for a while. But yeah, starring Oscar Isaac and Domhnall Gleeson, and I forget the girl who's in the movie. I think her name is Alicia Vikander.
She's a babe.
I knew it. I knew you were getting a little hot for her, bro. And yeah, so it's a really interesting movie where it's almost like set in the modern day, where there's like a Google-esque company, I would say, kind of like the world's biggest company or whatever, run by a young billionaire type genius, philanthropist, you know, one of those kinds, a Mark Zuckerberg type, I guess you would want to say. And Domhnall Gleeson's character, who works for Oscar Isaac. So Oscar Isaac is the CEO of this Google type company, and Domhnall Gleeson is an employee of his, or not directly an employee of his, but of the company. And he wins a contest basically to spend a week or a weekend with Oscar Isaac. Yeah, something like that. Basically, and see what he's working on. That's the inciting incident. Basically, right from the opening, is you're thrown into Domhnall Gleeson's character. Caleb is the name. As he wins this competition and goes to visit Oscar Isaac for the first time.
Yeah, and from there, he shows Domhnall Gleeson what he'll be doing with him, and that is testing an AI project he's been working on. Yeah. And this AI project is a robot, a fully functional... humanoid, artificial intelligent, humanoid-like robot. And
yeah, if you've ever seen those, like, in real life, I'm talking about, if you've ever seen those humanoid robots, like, it's gonna be weird to talk about this because there's so many parallels to, like, today's world, but if you've seen that woman robot with the clear skull, like, clear back of the head that you can see all the technological stuff going on inside, and she talks, and I think she's had, like, a conversation with Barack Obama, like, in real life, that robot, it's modeled off of her, so it's like what she would look like in like 5 more years from today, you know? And so yeah, so it's like the most advanced AI, as if like the thing that could stand next to you as a human and you wouldn't be able to differentiate pretty much, you know, right, what's real or not.
So as things move on and he starts conducting tests on the AI, slowly things get revealed that, you know, this isn't what it seems to be, and it's extremely tense until that absolutely crazy conclusion, which I'm sure we'll get into spoilers in a bit, but
yeah,
I want to
everything builds. Yeah.
you
Sorry, go ahead.
about just the performances in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is my favorite thing Oscar Isaac has done.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? His performance, it doesn't make sense. Like I'm trying to figure it out, and I think because I've watched this movie a lot. Actually, this was like a really big movie for me when it first came out in 2014, and so I've seen this quite a bit. And this was your first time viewing it, right?
Correct.
Right. So I watching it this time, kind of after a couple rewatch, I saw like so much depth in Oscar Isaac, especially just like what he was trying to be, like what the character is, because you can't figure it out, I don't think, in a first viewing. It's really wild, it's really crazy, and it's just zany, like, almost.
That's what I want to sort of talk about.
Yeah, go ahead.
This movie really makes you question like character motives. And that's why I think I like this movie so much, because I really like character driven narratives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's at the core what this is. It's a very character driven narrative. It's like three very distinct, very set characters thrown into a situation they can't escape, and let's see what happens. And you slowly begin to understand that as these people do questionable things, it's like, okay, yeah, but that makes sense. Like, what would you do in that situation? Right? Who is really wrong in this situation? There's no real hero. There's no real villain. It really makes you sit down, and it makes your brain work pretty hard. It's like, okay, yeah, like, but was that wrong to do? Mm-hmm. It wasn't
it's
a good thing to do,
morally
but
ambiguous.
Like, was it wrong to do?
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
It's super morally ambiguous. You're right. Like, the people that you think, I don't know if you had this experience, but what is almost in the beginning set up as protagonist, antagonist, like switches a couple times, or at least from the beginning to the end, leaves you questioning a lot of shit, motivations, and yeah, there's no really clear protagonist or antagonist. This is really just putting three people in an environment and seeing where things go. And I know you love that a lot, just kind of dropping characters in and seeing how characters react. And I want to ask you, where from the beginning of the movie and where you thought the movie was going in your own mind before it got there, did it meet your expectations, or did it go off on a completely new tangent?
It exactly what I thought would happened, but the execution was so great that I fucking clapped, bro.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Mm-hmm.
That one scene in the hallway in the climax, and I'll just say the line, and I don't think that spoils anything, but when he goes,
I know the line.
Unfucking believable. Unfucking real.
Unfucking real, yeah.
Collapsed, and I was like, I went back and I watched that scene like 3 more times after I finished the movie. Like the music, the performance, the everything, right? And I actually went back and I read the screenplay, because I was just like, I want to know like how they planned this out. And turns out it was changed a lot. The screenplay
was really,
the screenplay. Like I wasn't able to get like an up to date version. I was able to get an older version of the screenplay, an older published version. And they changed so much subtle things, but
like what were some things that they changed? I'm really interested in that.
If you can remember. I can't get too spoilery. They added some lines in. That's what I went in for, because Oscar Isaac characters whispers that one line, and I really wanted to know what he said, and I went in and that line wasn't in there, so I couldn't get the subtitles. I still don't know what he said. I really wanted to figure out what that was, but they added some lines in. They changed the order of certain actions within that scene. But I think they changed it for the better. There's because it just works perfectly.
That's what they usually say. Like, editing is the third cut of the script, essentially. So that the editor will show new things, and I think like I feel like Oscar Isaac might have ad-libbed quite a bit or improvised quite a bit. Like, it just seems like such a human role. Like, it's such a human performance. It doesn't seem like it's such a it's a hard character to figure out. Where is he coming from? Who is he? But if we kind of get into spoilers a little bit, like I feel like this guy kind of has like a god complex sort of thing going on.
It's
Did
pretty
you get that vibe?
nail on the head with regards to that complex, but I feel like the way it makes you toy with how that character could develop a god complex is really realistic. It's like,
yeah, it's how even, and it shows the little things of how he came to certain things. Like there's the small joke almost that goes throughout the film where Caleb says something quotable, right? And what's Oscar Isaac's character name? I should know this.
You should know this. I think we both should. I just know him as Oscar Isaac.
Nathan. His name is Nathan.
Nathan.
So Nathan keeps saying, "Oh, there goes Mr. Quotable again." Like pretending like he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, like just saying some very wise philosophical words, and almost like a very bro thing to do. Like like a very he comes off like a bro, but then there's a later moment in the scene. He's like, "No, I know exactly what the fuck you're talking about. Don't get me wrong, bro. Like I'm playing this bro role for you, but I'm really kind of like 3 steps ahead of even what you're thinking on, like there's all these small little details of that he is like, he's not playing a role necessarily for Caleb, but he is playing him. He's playing Caleb. The whole thing is orchestrated around Caleb. The whole trip up there and the experiment and everything.
Right. He is using Caleb, and it's pretty clear off the bat that's the case, that he's using and he's able to easily manipulate Caleb.
Yeah. Right. I thought this was a big film on manipulation for sure.
Oh God. Yeah.
On how. Yeah.
What was I gonna say? He back to that sort of god complex character trait from him. It's like you really hate him at first. I was really surprised at how well they made me hate this character. But then as time goes on and you realize like he's actually kind of tragic. And he's tragic because he's so much better than you. Yeah. And then he talks about that one story or that one thing where he's like, when AI look back on us, they're just going to be astounded that we did anything. Right? Yeah. And he just feels as though the work he's doing is completely necessary in the evolution of
mankind, of like the greater intelligence, the greater thing. Yeah, of intelligence, of the greater. And if he's just a small piece, like he realizes he's just a small piece in the greater machine kind of thing.
Right? And if he's going to be the guy that does it,
yet he is egotistical at the same time.
But he might as well be the guy that does it.
Yeah.
Because someone else is going to do it, and then he won't be remembered.
I think that's his biggest thing is like, how does he get, maybe that's exactly what you said. How does he get remembered? Because when Caleb says that line about him basically being like God creating life, kind of matching that, right? And he was really attached, like, oh yeah, I like that time when you called me God, like that was a very on the nose moment of this God complex thing, but that was a little deeper in the side of, he is egotistical, like he wants to be remembered like a god, like he, that's obviously like creating AI is going to put you on a next level functionally and like functional AI or whatever, but that recognition as a human puts you on, that's even greater, and I think that's what drives him.
Yeah, and again, like this movie toys with it. It's like, but can you blame him? Can you blame him for wanting to be that if he has the opportunity to do it, right? He has the opportunity to be remembered as this god that created the next life form.
Yeah.
If he doesn't do it, someone else is going to do it.
Yeah, and you said something interesting about him being tragic, and I thought the same thing. And the reason I think he's tragic is because he's like, he's very alone. Like, being a genius is not a very occupied space, I feel. Like, you probably don't have many genius friends on the same caliber as him, right?
Right. Being as smart as he is like kind of like being on an island.
Yeah, exactly.
No one can reach him.
And without being on an island, he's on an island, essentially, right? Like, you get a sense of that isolation completely throughout the film. Like, they're in an enclosed box. Very beautiful scenery, but scary, to think about at times. And that ending really hits that hard, that fear. But what was I saying? Yeah, he is alone with just him and his AI robots, essentially. And he's that insanity kind of, like I think geniuses, like these people that create things, are they're mad, like like there is that a little bit of insanity, like what drives them to create it. So we're kind of figuring that out. Like he has this god complex, so he's also afraid of being alone at the same time, and that's what makes him a human character. There's he's throughout the film interacting with machine, and Caleb is his only human connection throughout the film.
And he seems to have lost that. He seems to be impersonating what he thinks a human should act like.
Exactly. Yeah, that's huge.
Oh God, I just figured out something. He fails at interacting as a person. The fucking robot doesn't. Right? So it really blurs the lines between, what intelligence is. Right?
Mm-hmm. Or what consciousness is.
What consciousness
what is this movie, like many sci-fi films, common sci-fi theme is like what is being human being and consciousness and all that, but this really speaks those words in like a really profound way. Like, how can you define those terms of being human or being conscious? Because there's people that are human by definition that are playing the role of what they think a human being is. Then there are things that aren't human, like Ava in the AI in the movie, that are figuring out for themselves, like, okay, why? Why are there these defining lines? Like, what makes me not human? Because I don't have a soul? Or like, there's all these questions that kind of tie into each other. And like, I guess I'm trying to say, like, it's letting you really think deep about these kind of core ideas of questioning yourself, even, who are you? What are you? And yeah.
Yeah, it's tough to dance around, but like,
it's tough to dance around. Yeah. I don't want to speak too, I don't want to beat around the bush of it too much, because we can get into the spoilers and get into it, but it's such a methodical film. It's like mesmerizing. Like each concept, each idea, like once it's in your brain and it sits in your brain, it won't get out easily. Like you're not going to stop thinking about those ideas.
No. I sat and this, much like The Lighthouse, this movie stains your brain. It really makes you sit and think, and it makes you go like put yourself in the shoes of the characters, put yourself in the life of the characters, like think about the decisions they made, and would you make those same decisions given that situation? Mm-hmm. And it really makes you contemplate on, what is human and what isn't. Like, is Ava human? Like,
why wouldn't she be, right? Like,
why would, like, there's nothing in that movie that doesn't, spoilers, there's nothing in that movie that doesn't discern her from being different than a human, other than maybe some mechanical stuff. But in terms of the ability to manipulate, the ability to surprise, the ability to, like, anything, right?
Yeah, everything she does, every scene she's in is insane. Like, because it's a movie, obviously you see it's a human being playing it, but when you really just kind of buy into the idea of what it's telling you, like, this could be a thing, like, eventually. And there's a really interesting video on YouTube I saw today from Unbox Therapy. What's the fucking name?
Yeah, Unbox Therapy.
Yeah, how did I forget it? And he got that Boston Dynamics dog into the show and unboxed that and fucking was messing around with that. And like he showed like where in 11 years this technology has come. Like there was 11 years ago was the first time we saw that video of the robotic dog, and those guys were kicking at it and it didn't fall, and like that was the real headline about it. Like, there's this dog that doesn't fall and it's a robot, it's AI, it's its own controlled thing. And then today, 11 years later, it's a consumer household toy, essentially a very expensive toy, but you could buy it online, and an AI can be in your house today, essentially doing its own thing. And like, what is 11 years from today gonna look like? Like, what is the Google Assistant? Like, I think that thing is scary smart, like Google Home and all that shit. What is that technology in 11 years? How smart is that going to be? And that's why I was trying to say, like, this movie is not a a sci-fi movie rooted in like 100 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now. And the director as much said this, like, this is a movie that could take place tomorrow in real life. Like,
That's
Google could announce
thing-
this technology tomorrow, and you
I
would be
think-
like, "Fuck, what do we do?"
I think we talked about this a little bit off mic, but like that's one thing about this movie that really stood out to me was there's no time distinction of like where we are, right? It isn't set 20 years in the future. It isn't set in the present. We don't know, right?
No, but I think it makes you want. It gives you the feeling of the present. I think there's a lot of those signifiers that this is at least present day, with the establishment of this kind of Facebook, Google type company and the CEO. There's like there was those parallels to like today's iconographic stuff.
Right, but like it doesn't
Outwardly say it. No. Yeah.
And that's really something smart the movie does because it's like it really, again, going back to that, like whether or not something's grounded within the era it is in, or whether it's relative or relevant, later on. I think this movie is going to stay relevant for a while because it touches on something that isn't like unique to a certain set time frame, but like this is something that's sort of progressed since the 2010s, like with the introduction of social media and data gathering.
Yep.
And all that.
It's a movie. Yeah, it's a movie inspired by today's world, but it's not like Space Force in the way that it's completely centered around today's time. Like, this is a movie that you could see in 20 years and look back on, like, this is where it started. Like, this is where the evolution of so and so technology has started, or where it's going. It's not like, what is it? What's a sci-fi movie? It's not like Oblivion, right? That you look at the aesthetics of that movie and the technology, and you're like, yeah, this could be 100 years into the future, or like a completely different Earth, Whereas Ex Machina is by design supposed to give you the feeling of Earth today, like this is the Earth that we presently live in, but this is the future of tomorrow, next year, next week, next month, in an hour, like who knows? 10 years from now, like it'll constantly leaving you thinking, when will this be my life?
This exact situation, the movie you're watching right now, could be playing out as you speak, or could be playing out.
That's
tomorrow.
what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like that's a really smart thing to do, and it really adds tension, and it adds like this is probably like this isn't a scary movie, but it's a movie that scared me. If that makes sense.
No, it is. The concepts are terrifying. That's what it is.
Absolutely.
The questions it asks you, the philosophical questions, the just everything like about it is, it's especially that last scene. Just holy fuck. And yeah, we didn't even get into score. Like amazing score to this movie.
Yeah.
Everything just builds on top of each other, and we were talking about this in our last sci-fi episode, but good sci-fi in my opinion works well when all those things, all those themes of sci-fi, I guess you can call it, the aesthetical themes also, and mixed with the philosophical themes, when they work layered on top of each other. And that plays so well into this, from the music to the setting to the cinematography. Like, the setting of the film is this like cabin in the woods-esque situation, but it's like the cleanest, most modern looking, like futuristic house in a serene natural environment, right?
Yeah, again, it's a unique enough setting to where it doesn't give you a distinguished, like it doesn't allow you to orient yourself in any sort of way to further that, like, this situation could be happening.
No, it's super ambiguous.
Yeah,
it's anywhere on
exactly.
Earth. Yeah, it's super ambiguous, and it's thematically, it's also like like kind of a visual cue of the world we live in today, kind of thing. Like how technology grows and how development, infrastructure, stuff like that grows. Like that naturalness, that natural world, or that natural aspect of even us as humans is slowly just getting taken over by the digital, by the technology, and like that is creeping in. That is starting to, those seeds are starting to get planted. And that's what I think this movie is kind of trying to show, is like, today we have Google Home in our homes, but tomorrow, what is it going to be? Today it's starting with data collection. Tomorrow, how is that data going to be used? So all the seeds in today's world are planted, and this movie is trying to project you into the possibilities, I guess.
It's a cautionary tale in a way.
It's a cautionary tale. Yeah.
Right?
For sure. Yeah.
Right? You meddle with godly forces, you might get the devil.
Yeah. Well, that's there. I love movies like that kind of show that like humans playing with fire type of thing. Right. And this movie is not. It's not like Lighthouse in the sense where I think it's trying to be an allegory for some kind of mythic story. Like, I think this is like a representation of today's myth. You know, if there was a modern myth of today's world, this would be a good movie to kind of represent that.
They
with
actually,
like with this.
I think Ethan within the movie mentions this, but they actually take from the inspirations for the movie take from the same mythos, and that's the mythos of Prometheus. Right, a Promethean situation, meaning, you know, Prometheus was the guy who stole fire from the gods and brought it down to the humans.
Mm-hmm.
But after doing that, he got punished by, and this is very visually represented in the Lighthouse, but for Prometheus, he got punished by being tied up to rocks on the shore by the gods, and then having an eagle come and eat his liver every day, but they'll regrow his liver. So every day his liver gets regrown, an eagle comes and eats it, which is shown in the Lighthouse, spoilers, but also this whole myth of humans taking fire from the gods and then getting burned for it.
Yeah. And yeah, that I guess that kind of mythological theme or story idea is played in Ex Machina a bit. Taking the idea of creating life is a very talked about, I guess, throughout all of stories, throughout all of storytelling. And that's why I say like this is like the modern myth, is because this is not like Frankenstein's creation. This is not a Frankenstein story, even though it kind of is. But this is like, what if Frankenstein was sexy? Right? Kind of.
I don't know if I'd say that. It's like,
and smarter. Smart
right?
And sexy Frankenstein.
It's what happens when you make something better than you, if that makes sense, right? What happens when you create a superior life form? Natural selection takes place, right?
Yeah.
This superior life form, coming from an ecologist, because I'm getting my master's in ecology, this new life form occupies the same environmental niche as humans, but since it's better in every way, it's going to now outcompete that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and that's what's very visually and literally shown in this movie, and it's sort of a warning sign of what's to come. It's like, all right, we play a role, us humans, as humans. We play a role within our social structure. We play a role within our environment. We play a role within the world context. What happens when we create something that's smarter than us, lives longer than us, is probably more powerful than us in every way possible, but still occupies the same space that we live in terms of social structure, in terms of the environment, in terms of the world, right? That thing doesn't need to eat. It has less impact. Like, it just...
Yeah, are we still the apex predator at that point, or
no?
What happens?
We are the inferior life form, right? Is this movie plays like, is that such a bad thing? Like, is this for the greater good?
Who knows? And actually, that, as an ecologist, what do you think about that? Like, outside the realm of the movie, if this is our future, what do you think about that? Because there's many different movies have shown this to us. There's many different roads that this path leads us on. There's the Blade Runner road, when we turn all these AIs into our slaves and they work for us and they're subservient to us and we control them in that way. Or there's the Terminator, timeline where they take over and it's we're fucked. We're going extinct and all that type of stuff. Where's the middle ground, I should say? Where's the world where we're all living peacefully?
There is no middle ground when it comes to competing.
That was dark.
No, there is. There isn't, right? And like, I'll give you an example, an ecologist example. You look at rivers in Michigan, right? There's a wide variety of temperature difference within rivers, right? Certain species work better in warmer rivers. Certain species work better in colder rivers. But there is no middle ground, right? You get a medium temperatured river, it doesn't matter. It's either the cold species fish is going to outcompete the warm species fish and kill them all off, or the warm species fish is going to kill off the cold species fish. It doesn't matter, right? 100 out of 100 cold streams will have the cold species fish. 100 out of the 100 warm streams will have the warm species fish. But the middle ground, they just fight constantly until one takes over. And that's it. So if we are not as suitable for our environment socially, environmentally, then we technically have no place. And whatever comes next is maybe the necessary step in whatever we are. If
That's almost... No, that makes sense to me, because I'll connect this a bit into what I'm studying in philosophy right now, what I just kind of wrote my exam on even, which is the... it also has to do with ecology. I didn't even know if I told you, but I did ethics ecology, or environmental ethics, so a little bit of ecology and stuff like that. But there's a thing in there that was like, we are, as human beings, not the center. Like, obviously, you're not the center of the universe. People used to think Earth is at the center of the universe, and humans think of ourselves in that same way. That it's not Earth's story, it's our story as human beings, right? We're the main character. But if you change the perception of that into, we're actually just like ants on Earth, you know, this is Earth just going about the rounds on a cycle, on a cyclical thing. And, you know, like, we were developed by evolution and mutation, starting off from monkeys or whatever, if you want to believe that, into what we are today. And who's to say that the next part of that evolution doesn't have to be our happy ending? You know, it doesn't have to be our happy ending. And what you said is fucking scary, bro. Like, because that makes sense to me. Like, the whole fish analogy even, like, yeah, because why not? You know, like, if we are the ones that are fucking up our environment, and there's another species, right, dependent on the environment to survive, why wouldn't they take it upon themselves to be like, you know what, like, fuck these guys. If we can't educate them or explain to them to change their ways, fuck them. You know, the water's got to stay warm.
It's also a matter of, in terms of how we improve, is through random mutation and luck, right? But
isn't it, I don't know if it's luck though, it's a lot of it is the needs of survival.
Right, exactly.
When like,
those
temperatures
needs
change, then we change to that, quote
when
unquote,
those needs
like,
no longer
you know?
exist, and the route to improvement is no longer through the physical environment, but rather through data. There's nothing stopping. I can't improve my species, if that makes sense, right? But we as a collective can improve the species. A singular AI can improve itself beyond what a collective group of people can do, right? So it's a completely different realm in terms of where we fit in a world that has something that can improve itself over and over, right? In
the span of like a millisecond, essentially. It can get smarter in no time at all.
It can know everything, technically.
Well, that's what didn't they say, what's that called? The moment when the singularity, I think that's what they call it.
Yeah.
Right? When AI reaches that point of breaking past what human intelligence is. So they say like the point when they develop AI and to the point when they reach that singularity is like a nanosecond. Like, it won't be like me thinking of how to make a cake and I have to think about the ingredients and think about the direction and the time and blah, blah, blah. It will be like in the snap of a finger that now they're just the being of all knowing.
As soon as it figures out how to improve itself, as soon as an AI begins to understand how to expand its own intellect, it will just happen once, right? Say it expands twofold. Okay, well, it goes from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 to 64. How fast? We don't know. But it's a singularity.
There's no measurement. It just happens. Yeah, that's the singularity. And that's, now that we're kind of, I'll bring this full circle back to the movie. What is consciousness in that? Like, how do you define that then? If Ava in the movie is like the prime example of what AI can be, and she's a conscious being, she can think, she can deceive, and she can, she can do all these things that human beings can do so well. but she's not biologically human and she doesn't fit this description of a conscious being of our description, then what is that? Something entirely new? Is that an evolution of consciousness, essentially? Like how humans can evolve, can the idea of consciousness also evolve?
The idea of consciousness we don't even understand, right? It's tough to explain. Like, I really don't think the AI thing is even close, because people don't understand how our minds work in terms of consciousness. Humans don't view objects as objects. That's tough to understand, but like humans view objects as function, right? You see a beanbag chair. What would an AI do with that? How would they know how to work with that? We see a beanbag chair. We just sit in it. We understand it's for sitting. It's a function. Mm-hmm. They understand it as an object within a set space, right?
Yeah, right.
So it's really difficult being able to...
Sorry, yeah, that's AI today, though. You're explaining like today's
AI today is programmed to conduct a function, whereas we view function out of things that don't have a function, technically.
But what if you can teach a robot to think like that, bro? Like Elon Musk is saying exactly that. The guy is talking about how he's going to program a robot to make neural connections the same way human beings have neural connections. That the same way, like you just said, if a robot or an AI looks at a chair, that suddenly all the things that a human being would think are now trains of thoughts that the AI can think. So it's programmable, but it's also natural. It's a natural process of finding those things. But
biologically, it's tough for us to explain as to why we think that way. Like when you think of a chair, you think of it like, okay, I can sit in a chair, but think of how many other things you can do with a chair. It's hard to get any sort of artificial intelligence to think that same way. It's like, yes, you can program an AI or a robot to see a chair and be able to sit down in it, but how well can you train an AI to see a chair and use it in a wrestling match?
That's freedom of choice. If you can teach an AI the concept of choice and everything of that, what that means, then you've got at least, like, human beings are complicated, right? Like, you can't just say human beings are one thing. We are beings that can choose. Like, no, we're much more than even that, right? There's so much depth to what a human being is. So you're right in the sense that I don't think, at least in the near future right now, like an AI will be able to get to that close of a level because it's just too complicated. There always will be, I think, a defining line. But if, like I brought that example, bro, like 11 years from now, like you look at video games in the 1970s or 80s and you got Pong, you got just pixels working on a screen. And you look at things today and it's like, well, that happened in a lifetime. Like, what is our lifetime going to show us? How, it's just moving at such an increasingly fast rate that in my head, there's everything as a possibility. There's no lack of chances, especially with how data is being collected now. And like, I love how the movie got into that Ava is a creation is only possible because of things like social media and Google and data input and collection. It just grounds the story in such a real world and like in a real world way of understanding it. And all of that makes sense to me, bro. Like that's like, if somebody was to take a bird's eye view of one person's Google search history or time spent on a computer, and you looked at their entire life spent on that computer, you're seeing a person, you're seeing a personality, you're seeing consciousness, you're seeing a way of thinking, you're seeing patterns of thought. So who's to say you can't translate that? You get what I'm saying? Like,
I get what you're saying, and that's what the movie said. I do think that's a fun way of looking at AI. I don't think that's...
It's sci-fi, but...
I know. Yeah. That's where the sci-fi thing comes out. That's when the fiction comes in. Because I don't think that's the way AI is going to end up. Right?
How do you think AI is going to be? It'll be more practical? Like, it'll just be your phone talking to you type of shit?
Again, it's hard to understand even, like, when you create consciousness, like, why would it be like us? At all. Right? Ava is very human. He made a human consciousness. But like when you create an artificial consciousness, it's not necessarily human, it's a new thing. So it wouldn't act human. If that makes sense. So it's a fun way to interpret, and it's a very like visually striking way to show humanity in regards to consciousness and AI. But that's where the fiction comes in. It's not like a realistic way. But that's okay. I'm like totally
no,
down.
of course it's not. we're not watching a documentary and expecting it to be, you know, like
No.
a realism. It's not a realism movie.
No.
Or you know what? It's not realistic in the sense, like, you're right, it's completely science fiction and it's all in that sense, but there's enough there, I think, that lends itself into what can be. You know, it's not. It's like Ava is a science fiction concept completely to see a human visualized and externalized like that. And in our lifetimes, like, I'd be surprised if something like that close to, you know, Ava exists. But maybe with not all those features, but, you know, you're walking in a mall and you will see something like that one day, you know? Somebody helping you with your groceries will be not a human being and will tell you everything you need to know about the groceries you want to find. And I think still being able to draw a line from like a movie in 2014 that came out to something that can happen like that, like what I just described tomorrow, you know, if that happens tomorrow suddenly, that Google just develops something like that, like, it's interesting to see where that comes from, you know, where that kind of foresight comes from. I think, like, even like I'm going all over the place with the philosophy side of it, but like, human beings are so kind of crazy in that way that we can like predict our own, whether you want to call it like downfall or our own, we can predict our own future like that, where we're getting so on the nose. I feel with our storytelling, like, it's getting so close to like just like laying it all out there. Just this is what it is. This is what it's going to be like, you know?
Yeah. It's tough to say. It really is. This is just it's a really creative way of looking at that, and it's a really scary way of looking at that, of what can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But overall, it's just I don't know what else to say about it. I think you hit the nail on the head for sure.
It's a mind fuck of a movie.
It is.
Like, I put it on our Instagram story for Mythic Morons Mythic Morons. You know, follow us on Instagram. Put it on the story there. That little tagline up was just holy fuck. Like, that's simply put what all you need to know going into it. It's just a mind fuck of a movie, man. Like, it's like when you texted me after, you were like, what'd you say? Like, that was fucking terrifying or something like that. You know, like, it's not a horror film by any means. No. You know, you'll go into it and you'll laugh in many moments. You're gonna think like, what the fuck am I watching? Like, what is this? You'll feel such a range of emotions, but that last scene illustrates so fucking amazingly like what all of this means, what all of this is, and it just shows you a little bit about what being a human is, which is cool. You know, I think what movies end up striving to do is just peering into the soul a little bit, you know, without getting too spiritual about it, but like, it's a reflection of what it means to be human. And like I said, like, it's such a wide net. Like, you can't just say we are one thing. So that's why there's so many movies also that exist. It takes a lot to kind of describe what we are. So to that point, like, you know, you're right. Like, in the sense that you know what would be scary? If one day an AI makes a movie or it draws a painting. Like, what the fuck is that going to be like? You know, what is an original creation or a thought of an AI going to look like? So that's another intriguing idea.
For sure. And not only do sci-fi movies sort of peer into, well, they peer into the human experience, right? And on differing levels. The Ex Machina is more of a peering into the individual human experience, whereas a movie like Snowpiercer is more or less looking at a societal human experience. Yeah,
very good transition. I think that it's like polar opposite in that way. You're right. Whereas, yeah, Snowpiercer is much more a look on society, a look on sociologically how people act and how we form ourselves into these groups. So yeah, let's move on to Snowpiercer. So quick transition or quick synopsis for people who haven't seen Snowpiercer, don't know what it's about. Snowpiercer was directed by Bong Joon-ho, who was the recently Oscar award-winning director and highly acclaimed filmmaker for Parasite. So everybody who even doesn't know movies knows Parasite, which is, I find amazing now. Like, an international movie has that much acclaim. So that's why I'm kind of tying it into Parasite. Like, this is the filmmaker behind that. And this movie, like, it's very similar in its themes. Like, Bong is he's an auteur in the sense that he has these themes that he plays with constantly in all of his movies. So society and kind of the black, white, and gray, right, of society is prevalent through most of his films, I would say. And so yeah, and he's a South Korean filmmaker, and this is a Hollywood movie. So I'm also going to get into a bit of what I think that means. I think he's very consciously made it an English cast, an English speaking movie. Like, he didn't have to do that. And Snowpiercer is based off a graphic novel, right? It's based off a French graphic novel. So this is a story that was originally told for a French audience, or in the French demographic, kind of for those people, I guess, kind of thing. Translated by a South Korean filmmaker for an American audience, right? So I think there's this very, very universal story within Snowpiercer, and it's basically about humanity trying to kind of combat climate change has developed a chemical agent called C35, some sci-fi name,
some made up thing that was never explained.
Yeah, only explained very briefly in opening credits. So yeah, film opens with some credits to kind of establish the world, and basically things go wrong. So humans try to fight global warming with science, and things go really bad for humans, and Earth freezes over. There's a new ice age, essentially, and the last of the human race is believed to be boarding on, or has boarded onto, a train which is traveling all around the world, just circling the world, basically, and all of humanity is believed to be just on that train. So we're introduced basically into the world, which is the train, right? Now, the entire world is this train, and it's a reflection of our world today, essentially. The train is split up in these classes. There's the lower part of the train, which is the lowest class of people who are, stuck, like, living like shit, eating like shit. Then there's a middle class, and then there's a higher class. And the film is about traversing those classes, kind of making your way through those classes. And yeah, like, that's a small synopsis without getting too deep into it. And basically, yeah, so they're trying to get from the tail end of the train.
They're trying to seize power of the train, because the people at the tail end of the train, the low class people, the people that got screwed over, are trying to now take control of the engine room, because they want to now sort of have a revolution. They want to overthrow the current power and have a new leader.
Establish a new power.
Yeah.
Establish a new leader, or a new kind of power. So this was your first time watching Snowpiercer as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've seen this film a couple times, but what were your first impressions? Let's get into it like that. What were your first impressions?
I was incredibly bored by this movie. It lost me within the first 10 minutes. I think, once again, I'm very, like, character driven, and I think the characters in this movie are atrocious. Not like atrocious, but like serviceable at best. The main character, Curtis, and his, like, whatever his friend was, they're just not likable to me. I think they're idiots. Curtis's whole arc is trying to realize that he's a leader, but while he's doing that, everyone is following his lead in this whole revolution. So it's like, are you, like, that dumb that you can't see that you're a good leader for people? And he just refuses, and it's, like, so frustrating. It's like, you're an idiot. Like, just... Right? And then his friend, like, is so annoying. I couldn't stand him whatsoever.
Yeah. Jamie Bell, basically the rat of the train, who's just, like, that's what he reminds me of as a character in the film. He's just like a rat, kind of scrummaging around, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so, like, I didn't think the main cast was likable. I'm not even sure if they were supposed to be likable, but it seemed that way because the villains were so cartoonishly evil that it's
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that word cartoonish kind of just spoke to me. It's based off a graphic novel, so my sense of like you're using the word cartoonish, but my interpretation was almost like it's very graphic novelish. It's very much like Sin City almost, you know, like with how Sin City just painted these very graphic characters, cartoonish characters, you know, and just these visually distinctive people that have these traits. And Snowpiercer does that heavily, you know, like you see somebody in that movie and you know what that person's about immediately. You know, Curtis is the leader, and you know, and I see the flaw I see in Curtis that you just said, and my only reply to that is to look at it in a different way. That his arc isn't necessarily that he's becoming a leader. He's figuring out what a leader is, what it means to be a leader. I think that's what his arc is, because you're right. He begins the movie leading the thing, and he's kind of in the beginning a reluctant leader. He's like, oh yeah, fuck, what's the guy's name? So bad with names in movies. John Hurt's character Gilliam, right? The old leader, the old head of the train, the wise old man kind of thing. He wants Gilliam to take the place of Wilfred, who is the engine master, kind of running the whole train and all of that, and who's oppressing the people in the tail end. So he wants Gilliam to take that leadership, not him. He doesn't feel like he's a good leader. Yet, like you said, he is still leading the group. So I think his arc is not accepting of that he's a leader, but it's learning. And through him, we as an audience learn also what is a leader. I think that's what this whole movie is. It's not in a sense to understand characters' arcs or who are these characters. Like, it's character driven, but I think as a movie, it's more as a way to understand human beings in a sociological sense, like how we fit roles in as a society and how we group ourselves in society. What rules do we establish for ourselves, and what kind of world have we built? Because the premise of Snowpiercer is essentially the world has ended and the world is beginning anew on this train, right? That's the context. And you see, like, okay, the world ended. That means politics, religion, the rules of the old world ended with that world, right? And then you see life on this train. It's like, okay, not much is different. It's exaggerated. It's a lot of exaggerational things. That's what movies do, but it's not trying to. It's trying to show you what human beings do when we are put into these situations of deciding for ourselves, of building a life for ourselves, those kind of things. You know, does that kind of like change your perception a little bit of it?
I agree that it's not really about the characters, it's about the premise. I just think the premise itself isn't strong enough for me to carry the movie. I think I needed a better cast of more likable characters. Like, I don't mind the villains being cartoony, right? Again, I don't mind that at all, but just have a likable cartoony protagonist to go after them.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think you're right in the sense where I don't think they're even trying to make Curtis likable. Because by the end of the movie, you know, there's the section he has with the Asian speaking character.
Yes.
Nam. Nam is his name. Nam Goon.
Yeah.
Right. He's having a moment with him where he's getting into his backstory a little bit and revealing some stuff about him where you're like, oh fuck, like this guy's a bit of a shady character. This guy's not like, it makes you start to question what a leader is in that moment. You know, the leader, the way we see it is a very black and white way. There's good leaders, there's bad leaders, but the responsibility of a leader, I think, is what this movie kind of gets into. Like, what does it mean to lead civilization, lead the world, or, you know, be somebody in charge? And yeah, like I thought it did that well. Like, when I feel like I want to get into really invest into a world, kind of a sci-fi world, or see a kind of another contained story. Like, this whole movie takes place in a train, so it's very literally a contained story. But I think this movie so well just kind of throws you into a world with these established rules and characters, and just explores this very sci-fi, very unique world, and kind of details today's problems to you in that way. You know, it's a vehicle to kind of explain today's politics. almost.
It's yeah, the train is a microcosm for the way the world works today, but in a very exaggerated sense. And I
Yeah, very
understand that,
exaggerated. Yeah. Yeah.
and I think it's a cool idea. I just need to have a catalyst within the story itself to follow along through, and I didn't really have that. Like, it was hard for me to place myself within the story when there's no one I could attach myself to whatsoever, right?
So yeah, you really just didn't like, I guess, Curtis as a protagonist, because I guess you could, as an audience, you can kind of fall in either way. Because my appeal to Curtis is not that I could relate to him, but that he's a very morally ambiguous character. Um, he's not like a clear coat of one shade. There's moments where he makes very questionable decisions, and throughout that you're questioning what all of this is about, this revolution, why they're fighting, and just leads you to all these questions.
Right, and I don't have a problem with morally ambiguous characters. It's just that when the characters they are opposing are not morally ambiguous, they are, like, without a doubt, comic booky evil. It's hard to cheer for someone that's morally ambiguous, you know? It's like, give me one or the other. It's like either have a morally ambiguous villain and a hero sort of clash, or like a clear coat good guy bad guy situation.
I feel you. Yeah, I think that could have helped it, like a kind of a morally ambiguous villain, which I think they were almost doing a little bit, but then they went pretty. They kind of set the standard of who the villain was. Wilfred, like, yeah, I agree with you. That's basically what I'm saying. Like, if they kind of that's the whole theme almost of the movie, is like just this moral ambiguity throughout the whole situation. So yeah, if you know what villain I really liked, actually, even though she was really cartoonish and campy, but Tilda Swinton's character, who, like, on Google, her name in the movie is Mason. So I don't know if she would, like, the character was based off a male character and they casted Tilda Swinton or something, but I thought her kind of antagonist role was cool, because she's almost like Hans Landa from Inglourious Bastards, in the sense, like, she'll just get out of whatever situations she's in, like, or she'll say whatever she has to do to get out of the situation she's in, kind of thing. And yet she's also a unique character, in, like, that she's so indoctrined into the world of what she buys into that so much. So I found her interesting in just, like, how her and Curtis interacted. Like, they're both very set in their ways in the beginning of the film, you know?
I get that. It's hard for me to even explain how I feel, but, like, it was just boring to me, and I hardly pay attention to this movie. I don't know, I should, because I'm doing a podcast about this stuff now, but it's like I couldn't even orient myself within because the setup for the story itself is dumb in my mind. It takes fiction to stretches fiction out incredibly thin to how this world is set up. And then when you have this story that's been told over and over and over again, the low class people coming up to have a revolution, but then things aren't what they seem. It just was like, I kind of knew how things were going to end up, and they ended up exactly how they ended up, except this time I was following a character I didn't like, or a set of characters that I didn't like, right? Because it didn't give me a reason to like them, and that may be the point, but, like, it gave me a reason to hate the other people. So at least give me a reason to hate it, or to like this guy, right? And then there's also a bunch of little things like directing choices where it's like, you know, it's kind of like, it felt like in certain instances within the movie, it wasn't like a laugh track, but like a shock track. It's like it felt like some parts of the movie they paused for the audience to gasp, and I didn't buy those.
Yeah, I think that lends itself, my interpretation of those moments, because I know what you're referring to. I think that lends itself into the nature of it being based off a graphic novel, and he's trying to almost tell it in that kind of way, kind of like how Sin City had those very unique to itself techniques of showing it being a graphic novel story using color and using directing and stuff like that, or just the director's choices in his techniques. So, okay, let's kind of get into spoilers with this one, because I want to get into the specifics of what your gripe is, and also to see what scenes kind of didn't buy it for you, because I thought there were some scenes that were like just great, like just well directed and well kind of placed within the story to make me feel all the right things. Because I like when you say it, like you don't like the protagonist that much, or the cast of characters that you're following. I kind of feel like you're supposed to kind of like buy into them in a superficial way, in the sense that you buy into the rebels in Star Wars because they're the rebels and the Empire is like the Nazis, right? So you on a surface level, you're supposed to cheer for the rebels. And I think this kind of parallels that almost, that on the surface level, yeah, you're supposed to cheer for the people who are oppressed or whatever. But I think you're a smart audience, right? Like you're a smart movie watcher, and you're almost like looking at it already, trying to see like, okay, but why am I supposed to cheer for you? Why am I supposed to cheer for you? And they're not giving you that because of that moral ambiguity outwardly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like at least the rebels had a plucky leader that I could really enjoy following along and following his adventure, right?
Well, sure. That's all shouts out to Mark Hamill, though. He's just 1970s pure charisma. Like that's just America's fucking sweetheart right there.
Yeah, but what did this movie give me? It gave me some asshole that eats babies, and his
spoilers.
Yeah, sorry, and his stupid, annoying, like no reason to be rude Irish friend. Spoilers, who fucking dies, and I laughed. I was like, oh,
But a great, okay, because now we're gonna get into spoilers. Like that was a great scene. I thought that was probably one of the best scenes in the movie. His death scene.
I laughed so hard.
I mean, it's. I don't know why you laughed. It wasn't funny, outwardly funny at all. Like it was kind of horrific.
Funny to me, the attempt they tried to make me care about this annoying character that I wish died earlier.
But they're not trying to make you care about him. They're trying to make you care about Curtis's choices in that moment. That scene is a reflection of Curtis.
Right. Yeah. It's
because you're right. Like you're not supposed to care. Like you're supposed to care about that Irish guy, Jamie Bell's character. I forget his name. Edgar is his name. You're supposed to care about him because he's a kid. He's young in the movie. He's plucky. He's trying to be helpful. You don't get much more than that character wise. And I think you're supposed to buy into that. You're supposed to look at these people somewhat on a surface level, and then reflect on what all that means. Because Bong Joon-ho is a fucking smart director. I'm sure I know on a directing level, he thought out everything well enough compositionally that he must have thought out the characters to think like you're supposed to, like, I don't want to think like I know the right answer or there is right answer or whatever, but I think like he must have thought about that a little bit, of Edgar dying, and that like you're not supposed to care about him. Like fuck that guy. He's a plot device essentially in the movie.
Right, and I don't like characters
and maybe that's your gripe. Yeah, maybe that's your gripe.
It's like
he's used as a plot.
Why even spend time like this movie shouldn't be 2 hours long. It's way too long, right? So if you're gonna use characters as a plot device, like don't waste screen time with them doing asshole shit, because he was being an asshole. It's like, why are you being this needless dick? And I'm supposed to like you? And then when you die, who I don't like, why would I even care about you? When you die, you're now like the primary motivator for the main character's second half of the story.
Yeah.
It's like,
that's what it's supposed to be. Yeah, everything you're saying is pretty much right, but I think that's how you're supposed to look at it at the same time, is that he served his purpose to the story and to Curtis, basically, that what kind of leader is Curtis going to be, and that scene when they're in that section of the train, and that scene perfectly tells what the story is about. Like, are you looking forward or do you look back? And what's necessarily the right or wrong thing? Like is it always a blanket right or wrong answer with your actions? Or the whole movie is about that ambiguity, that gray area, and that's what I think you're supposed to think, is like, yeah, I was fucking up with Kurt. I was fucking with Curtis up until this middle point. You know, like he was the leader. Yeah, he's a bit of a reluctant leader, and yeah, you know, and then that happens. You're like, this guy's a fucking cold-hearted motherfucker. You know, and then right after that, he pops a cap in Tilda Swinton's head,
Again,
point blank, and then you see this guy is cold, badass. Like, you know,
I think it would have worked better. Like, I don't mind like the moral ambiguity, but it's like,
yeah,
when the villains of the story aren't so morally ambiguous and their intentions are clearly evil. When you try to have a story with gray and black, it just, I just don't think it melds well. It's right. It's like, at least if you're gonna show moral ambiguity, like show like the higher class train carts, like show some like human interaction with them. All they did was show these higher class train carts to be full of assholes and drug addicts and indoctrinated kids. It's like, yeah, I don't care if these people die whatsoever, right? But the people who are taking over aren't any better, so why am I even cheering for them?
that's the whole point of the movie. That's what the ending signifies, right? Okay, so now we're getting into the real spoilers, the meat of the ending. The train at the end, basically there's an explosion and the train derails and a bunch of the cars delink and they fall down a mountain pretty much, and like you get into, a lot of people die essentially, and the train is now on its side, in like on the mountainside or whatever, and all our main characters, I don't want to spoil it like to the point where nobody wants to watch it, but like basically shit goes wrong, shit happens, and the two kid characters walk out of the train, and like that's such a jarring moment. You're like, what? Now I'm fucking landed on these kids. Like now we're gonna end the movie on these two kids who I barely spent any screen time with. Like, here's the thing though, this is not my gripe with the movie, because that's what I think the movie is trying to say. It's not about good and bad. It's not about quote unquote rebels versus empire, right? It's about trying to find that middle, whatever that middle is. And I wrote a lot of good notes about this movie, I think, but I can almost write like an essay, to be honest, about the notes I wrote. But there's this thing that you're right, like that higher class ambiguity wasn't there, but there was that middle class representation a little bit, which was the Namgoon character and his daughter, right? So you see these people as drug addicts, like junkie characters who are just going for the show just to get drugs, just to get high and whatever. And you realize their whole purpose in the story is like they're the smartest characters in the entire movie. These junkies. Their whole thing is like, why have we accepted the fact that we're locked in this train? That there's all this oppression, all this class dispute shit, and why have we just accepted that? Why doesn't anybody try going outside? Oh, we just bought into the idea that the world is frozen. Okay, that was 20 years ago. Like, why don't we check? You know, why doesn't anybody just check?
Well, they do check because
they're the smartest characters to make
the train and it freezes in 7 minutes.
What's that?
They stick a guy's arm outside the train and it freezes in 7 minutes. Like, everything they established in that movie up to that point still signified that the outside world was inhabitable. It's not, you can't live.
No, but there was a line before that moment happened where they were talking about like altitude and some shit. So like, I see what you're saying, but that's a bit like because reading into it.
If they're at a higher altitude, it takes less time to freeze.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think like the implication is that they're at a high altitude, so it froze, right? Something like that.
No, the implication is that like they judge the amount of time they need to freeze a body part based on the altitude they're at.
Right, but the fact that his arm okay, anyways, at the end of the movie they're outside, like, and then the last shot is that there's a polar bear, right? They're face to face with kind of a polar bear. And I thought this was a really weird ending that I wanted to talk to you about kind of in detail, but that ending to me, what it means is like, okay, like life exists and has continued to exist outside, whether it's human or not. Like, yeah, you stick a bear skin arm outside of a moving train at like 1,000 kilometers an hour somewhere in the mountains. Yeah, it'll freeze, a bear skin arm. But you know, like if you're properly covered up and shit, maybe you could have survived in that weather. Who knows? And I think that's what the ending showed. It's like, no, life continued. Life went on. There was, if a polar bear could exist, that means an entire ecosystem had to have existed for a certain amount of time, right?
2 humans we see live.
Only that's all we see just for the
No,
last scene.
I think
But
I'd
it
be
leads
much more
you.
interested in a movie where this crash tries to survive all the polar bears coming to eat them. Because the first thing that polar bear doing is hauling ass towards those two
That's
people
my first. That was my first impression of the ending. I was like, why would you choose to end on a polar bear
because
as your
it's
last
a
shot?
visual representation of climate change being solved. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Because the
yeah.
polar bear is the
I
mascot.
didn't like
Thanks
the
Al
ending.
Gore
Yeah,
to
I know. But my biggest gripe with the movie, like I like the movie a lot, but my biggest gripe with it was that ending, just because it was like too ambiguous. It almost didn't fit like the movie that it was showing. But I think the benefit of watching movies over and over again and just kind of accepting what it is. Like I understand in your first viewing, like you're gonna go in with kind of like limited expectations, and if a movie doesn't go the way you think, and I think though, like if you like watch it over and over again and like overall just accept like, okay, this is what the movie is trying to be and what is it trying to say and how well does it say those things. That's how I'm kind of judging this movie, less of like its flaws in character and stuff, because I can buy into why the characters are the way it's are in the context of how it's trying to tell its story.
I can buy the
you know
characters how they are as well. I just can't cheer for them. So like I have a hard
right,
time
right.
watching this movie. It was really hard for me to get through this movie.
Who I was like, I don't, yeah, like cheering's a weird word to use because like rarely do I ever catch myself like rooting that hard for characters, but like the junkie daughter in the movie, I thought she was one of like my favorite characters because there was like a little bit to her that was like she was like the word I'm looking for. She wasn't an integral character, but she said a lot about the movie. She was like she represented like a youth, kind of like a kid, like she was a kid, but she represents the new like kids of the new generation coming up in the world.
She also just seemed like a plot device though, because they just all of a sudden introduce her as like this psychic character. And
Yeah,
it's never explained and it's like used very sparsely. So there was like 3 times in this movie where I'm like, what's going on? And then I'm like, oh right, she's psychic, because they never they just say one throwaway line like,
oh, you're clairvoyant, aren't you?
and then she doesn't say yes or no, and
Yeah, she
then
just said, "Don't open that fucking door." And that
her
was a great.
power is used when it's convenient throughout the plot. It's like, and yet,
Yeah, that's a fair criticism.
and
That's pretty fair.
it's like, yeah, I enjoy like the concept of a character like this youth being born on the train and her father sort of like taking her through and like wanting to explain to her, what the old world was like and what we can do and bring into the new world once we get off this fucking train. I enjoyed that concept. I just,
Yeah,
like, again, like a lot of this movie is, and it might just be the graphic novel, it's like the characters are used as plot devices.
yeah, but I think you hit the nail on the head in the beginning before we started talking about it when you compared this to Ex Machina, and you said like Ex Machina is a story on the individual and on the self and like all the things that revolve around what that means, whereas this movie is much more societal based and group of people and what does all that mean. And so I think when it's trying to like the fact that that's what the movie is about, and you almost don't like, I understand your gripe, but that almost wouldn't have fit in like that if she had so much individuality and you got the full sense of her backstory. Like all of the characters in the movie played the role that they were supposed to play to tell the story that was supposed to be told.
Right.
And this,
And that's why I might check out the Snowpiercer TV series.
right, because it's a long form show. Yeah, that might actually just expand into all the things that you would have problems. Shows can do that. Shows can get into all the meat of it. But the fact that I think as a movie, maybe for sure is trying to brush over certain things. Like I don't know how fair it is even to say a movie is good purely off its thematics and how it's trying to convey those themes. Like, is it fair to say a movie is amazing just for that, or is it bad? Or is it fair to say a movie is terrible because the characterizations weren't up to my liking? Like it's such, that's another ambiguous thing. Like, how do we even judge movies for that? Like, because from my opinion is like, if that was Bong Joon-ho's intention of what you said, which is like, I want to make a movie of society and of how people in a group are and kind of taking a bird's eye view of people in a train in a contained environment, seeing how they act, then I think he would have accomplished that, without getting too much into the details of it, into the meat, but almost like an analogy, almost like a mythic story or like a worldly story.
I get that. I get that you value, probably as like a director, you value intention quite a bit. I value execution quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I just don't. I understand what they're going for. I understand, like, as I was going through, I was like, okay, that makes sense thematically or metaphorically, and like this visually represents this and this and this. And it's like, okay, I get that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just thought the execution was subpar. And
yeah,
I'd really
that's totally fair, bro. And I'd be interested in checking out the show as well, and we could get back to this kind of Snowpiercer conversation later in a later episode after watching the show and seeing how the show fares up, because I'm sure,
I also read a synopsis of the graphic novel, and it's a completely different story.
Really, because we were talking about the graphic novel before, but you said there was multiple books. So
yeah, but I'm not going to consider the second one, because the second one kind of just makes the first one null and void.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
Fair.
Because the second one,
yeah,
no one else is going to.
No. So the movie is just based off the first book.
The movie is based off the concept of the first book, and all the characters,
but not literally. Yeah,
not literally. Right. The story's different. Like the story's kind of the same, but it's like they took the liberty of introducing the world and they played around with the world. Right. The graphic novel, is same setting, different concept.
See, that's what I was kind of talking about in the beginning, is like, I found what's interesting about the story, whether it's like different, like as you're saying, from the graphic novel, and even if the TV show is completely different from the movie, is that there is something universal about the story that's translatable throughout so many different voices and for so many different types of audiences. Like, if the story starts its life out as a French graphic novel as one thing, and like it's now this movie that has its own unique style. It's not like how Sin City was trying to take pages off the book and kind of recreate that, but this movie plays with the tropes of a graphic novel, and I think in some parts it does it well, in some parts might not do it so well, but the way it translates it into like a kind of a modern day tale, it's like a parable. I think that's what it kind of is, and I'm interested to seeing if the graphic novel is like that too. If it at its core is trying to be like a parable, or if it's trying to be more of a fictional story, more of a sci-fi kind of thriller, Whereas I think the movie is more of a sci-fi parable in a sense.
Yeah. It's it just seems like they took advantage of the cool concept, even though I actually have gripes of the setting, because as someone who's taken atmospheric chemistry and climatology courses, the setting of this never exist.
Man, how do you even enjoy movies as a scientist? Like, I know you analytically break down everything you watch in science, and how do you even enjoy movies like that? I wonder.
Sometimes you learn to just turn your brain off. Like when
I think sometimes you got to do that. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
But like the outrageousness of the situation.
But then how do you like sci-fi then? Because sci-fi is mostly, not all, but like Ex Machina is almost different in that sense, but it mostly does play with the outrageous.
I'm sure if I was a data scientist, Ex Machina might piss me off.
Yeah.
Right. But
it's a different science. If you know the science, then you can dig deep in it.
Don't fuck with the climate. Like, I know the climate. I know how it works.
For sure. I'm kind of the same way when it comes to like, because my background in education is film. So like sometimes like I won't even enjoy a movie because I'm watching it as if I've watched the movie 3 times on my first viewing. Like I have to turn off that analytical side of my brain that's trying to figure out shot compositions and editing, and like that's so like subconscious to my thinking. I'm like, oh, he made that cut for this reason. Like I shouldn't think like that. Like, just enjoy the fucking movie as it's going, figure all that out later on a second viewing or a third movie. But like, I'm trying to like reteach my brain that now, like on a first viewing, go in as if you're a kid in the theater and you have no idea what the fuck you're about to watch. Just, you've only seen the trailer and just watch it. And I think that's almost a flaw to like modern day movies nowadays, or like modern day audiences, I want to say, is like that experience of just being able to go sit in and turn that off, and just, you know, the dumb part of your brain, allow that to just, not even dumb, I don't want to say that, but like your subconscious, right?
Yeah,
Because
that's
that's
why
what
I have
movies
like
speak to us. Yeah,
subjective ratings of films and then objective ratings of films. Because I can go
yeah,
in both ways. It's like, you know, if I'm
yeah,
watching the
yeah,
fucking Star Wars prequels and be like, oh yeah, this is fucking haha, that's the meme I see all the time. But then if I actually like
yeah.
try to break down what the movies did, I was like, okay, well this is not so great. So it's like,
Yeah, there's a big line when you define things from objective and subjective, like that list can change, that list can vary.
oh god, yeah. Like in terms of like my subjective enjoyment of, let's say, a movie like Infinity War, like
Yeah.
fucking 8 out of 10. Let's look at how the story is structured. It's
Can we talk about Infinity War? Because that's an interesting discussion we could have. I think the story structure of Infinity War is pretty fantastic.
I
That the
think
fact
time
that they
travel
could,
stories get pretty messy.
you're talking about Endgame then.
Oh,
Endgame
sorry,
is
yeah,
time travel.
Endgame. Sorry, not
Yeah,
Infinity War.
yeah, yeah.
Infinity
Okay.
War is woo. Infinity War is
Oh, top level, bro.
yeah.
Like
Sorry,
they,
Endgame is a little
yeah, 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 yeah. Endgame's yeah, that's a different story. They had to juggle a lot more balls.
yeah,
But I think like, yeah, well, that's a different discussion. We'll talk about Avengers another day maybe.
yeah.
But
Next week we have a big discussion planned. I'm supposed to
well,
watch.
are we still gonna do that? Like, have you even started that prep yet?
I haven't.
Because I haven't either. I mean,
It-
there's a couple days.
It's a busy
So,
week for me.
yeah, it's a busy week for me too. So maybe I think because that's a big prep, let's leave that for next week or the week after.
You want to do another Sci-Fi Smackdown?
I was thinking actually, because we had a good discussion about video games earlier in this episode. Do you want to talk more about video games in the next episode?
Actually, yeah, I'd be down
Yeah,
because I still want to talk about Doom a little bit. I'm gonna try to finish
sure.
Doom and then I'll get back to you.
Sure. Yeah. I really want to spend an episode talking about Death Stranding. I haven't had that chance yet.
Yeah,
So I want to geek out a little bit.
I'm curious because I don't think Death Stranding's my type of game, but I want you to convince me.
Sure. Yeah. No, for sure. Watch a couple videos on it so you're fresh up on it, but I'm going to play it a bit this week too again. And yeah, I've been gaming a lot more than watching movies the past 2 weeks at least. Like, at least hours wise, the amount of time I'm spending at home, I'm probably gaming more. And then at night, obviously turn on a movie or something. But I'm having a lot of fun. I'm playing Spider-Man PS4 again, or finishing the DLC of that. That's another game that we were talking about, flow state. You get into like a pretty rhythmic flow state with that game, and it's fun. And yeah, so that should be a pretty fun episode, I think.
All right. Good talk. I think that's about it for this episode.
That might be an episode. Yeah. Where are we?
We're pretty long.
We got a decent length here.
This
Yeah.
is the longest one.
Yeah. This was our Sci-Fi Smackdown 2, so I guess we're kind of going to continue the series as it goes. And let us know what kind of movies you guys want us to talk about, and we're always open to suggestions. You know, me and Cheney love geeking about the shit that we're talking about, and we want to continue doing so. So interact with us on Instagram, which is at Mythic Morons. Thank you for the people that are dropping reviews on our page. Please, on Spotify or podcasts or Google Podcasts or whatever it is, show us some love, drop us a review, and leave some comments, leave some fan interactions or whatever. Or yeah, and appreciate the people, all the people showing support. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. All right, signing off.
Yeah, it's getting late. Let's sign off now, and we'll see you, or we'll not see you because we don't see anybody. We're all quarantined, but we'll talk to each other at a later point.
All right,
I guess we'll end off like that.
see ya.